Why is this so cheap and this so expensive? Stick around and I'll tell you why. Before we start, if you like drawing, painting, sketching, really art of any time, I really encourage you to hit that like and subscribe button so that you can see more content like this in the future. If you've ever gone to an art store to get some paint, you've probably noticed that some tubes of paint are in the $3 to $4 range, and you can even get a whole starter set of 12 tubes for like 10 bucks or 15 bucks, and then you'll get other tubes of paint that just one single 40 milliliter tube may cost $40. Why is that the case? That's because there are two main grades of paint that are available: student grade paint and artist grade paint. And it doesn't matter what type of paint it is. This is true whether it's watercolor, acrylics, or oil paint. Now, what's the difference between them? Well, paint is basically comprised of two main ingredients. You have pigment and you have binder. Pigment is the powdery stuff that gives paint its color, and binder is the liquid material that holds all of that pigment together. Now, binder a lot of the times is not where your cost is. Binder is relatively inexpensive, and whether you're using an artist grade oil paint or a student grade oil paint, typically the binder is the same. It's usually a safflower oil or a linseed oil. Pigments can be divided up into different categories. So for instance, you'll have earth color pigments, you'll have organic pigments, you'll have synthetic pigments, you'll have mineral and heavy metal pigments. Some of these, like the earth pigments, are really abundant and they are cheap to source. Therefore, those paints are not nearly as expensive. Other pigments, such as the heavy metals, can sometimes be really scarce. Therefore, they are way more expensive. Now, if you're going to look at the ratio of pigment to binder in artist grade paint, you would find that there is a lot more pigment in the artist grade paint. And a lot of times the artist grade paints will just use one single pigment. And so that gives you a much better quality paint, and that that paint has a lot higher tinting strength. That means it doesn't take much of it to mix and match colors when you're making mixtures. In the student grade paint, as we said, most of the cost is wrapped up in the pigment. And so to reduce the cost of that paint, they will actually eliminate a lot of the pigment. So they'll use a much smaller amount of pigment, and then they'll add additional ingredients to the paint called fillers that extend the paint. And it kind of extends that pigment and makes it go a little bit farther. Now, the fillers can be all sorts of things, and different fillers stretch the paint in different ways and give it different working qualities. They can be things such as marble dust, talc, calcium carbonate, and all sorts of other things. Now, the question of the day is, which should you purchase? Well, I would say that depends on your goals. If you are someone who is just kind of dabbling in oil paint or any type of paint, and you want to just try it out and see if you're even going to like it, it might be worth it to just grab some student grade paints because they're going to be a lot cheaper. And if you don't end up liking it very much and you just toss the paint or you don't use it, no big deal. However, if you are trying out a certain type of paint with the intent of actually getting good at it, you see yourself doing this more in the future, I would really recommend getting the artist grade paint if you can afford it, because it's going to be so much better quality. It mixes way better colors, and a little bit goes a really long ways. Let me show you what I mean. So here we've got two types of oil paint. We've got a student grade oil paint on the left. That's the Master's Touch brand from Hobby Lobby. Sorry to pick on you, Hobby Lobby. And we've got the Utrecht artist grade red on the right. Now, these pigments are really, really close to the same. They're not exactly the same, but they're really close. So let's just test them out and see how strong they are. So remember, on the right is my artist grade and on the left is my student grade. Now, when I move them around, the first thing that I notice right away is the student grade paint feels a little bit more, well, I don't know what the word is, jelly-like than the artist grade. The artist grade is a little bit thicker, so that was kind of interesting right off the bat. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of flake white replacement, and I'm going to take a little bit of Hansa yellow, and I'm going to mix the same amount of each red with those piles of paint. We're just going to see what happens here to see if there's a difference between the artist grade paint on the right and the student grade paint on the left. So let's start with the artist grade on the right, mixing it with the red there. So you can see, or with the right, you can see that I'm getting a nice pink. Then mix with the yellow, and you can see that red is really strong. It really dominates, just a little bit of that red dominates that yellow. And we get a nice bright orange. All right, now let's try the same thing with the student paint. So you can tell right off the bat that it is much whiter. It doesn't have near the chroma or the punch in color that the artist grade paint does. And it's the same thing with the yellow when I mix the red with it. You can see that it makes a nice orange, but it is not anywhere near as intense as the artist grade orange. And this is because that student grade paint has less pigment and much more filler. So if I want to get the student grade paint on the left to match the colors that I mix in the artist grade, notice that I have to actually mix quite a bit more red in with my starter colors, my yellow and my white, in order to match the intensity of just that little bit of artist grade paint. So I'll do the same thing, mix quite a bit more red in here with my white, almost probably double the amount to get close to that same mixture. So as you can see, the student grade paint is not nearly as strong as the artist grade paint when you include it in a mixture. So something to keep in mind. Now, if you're somewhere in the middle and you're thinking, well, you know, that all makes sense, and so I really want to try the artist grade paint, but you know, I can't quite afford to, or I don't want to spend the money on all of that, then try and do a blend of them. So I think that you can get by with student grade paint if you get some of the less expensive pigments. So the siennas, the umbers, the ochres, things like that, a white, for instance. I think that you can probably get by with student grade paint if you buy those. And then I would take your money and save it and spend it on those stronger colors. So for instance, your bright reds, your yellows, your blues, if you use greens, oranges, violets, things like that, I would spend a little bit more money and get the artist grade paints because they're going to make way better paint mixtures for you. If you need some help trying to figure out what type of paint you should get, I've linked several different brands below and separated them into student grade versus artist grade to kind of help you out. So feel free to go and explore those a little bit. If you have any questions about any of this stuff, feel free to leave a comment below or give your opinion. I'd love to hear it. Hey, if you found this video helpful, I'd really encourage you to hit that like and subscribe button below. That way you can see more content like this in the future. And feel free to share this if you think someone else can get some value of it. With that, I will see you next time. Stay creative, my friends.